Holy City Center Radio. It is episode 104, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, April 3rd, 2023, and it is Championship Monday, baby. That's right. My UConn Huskies beat Miami in the Final Four. Another double-digit win for them this tournament. All of their games have been by double digits. They're just rolling right now. One game to go, and that is tonight. The men's national championship. My Huskies will be taking on San Diego State, who you may remember beat not only Furman, but the College of Charleston in the first two rounds. Once again, you are welcome on our bandwagon. I am happy to have you all and to cheer against the team that beat the South Carolina teams. So excited. I'm not going to waste too much time on it because I know none of you really care, but I'm super pumped up about the game tonight. So please cheer on those Huskies with me. My condolences to you South Carolina Gamecocks fans out there. Just a tough loss after an undefeated season. They lose in the Final Four to Iowa. Caitlin Clark went off. She is an incredible player. I know you all don't want to hear that right now, but it's true. And tough loss, but another great season for the Gamecocks women's basketball team. I'm sure they will bounce back and have another great season next year. And as I've already said, I'm a UConn fan, so I look forward to the Huskies and the Gamecocks going head-to-head again in the future. So, on the women's side, we got to look forward to next year already. But my men's team got one more game to go. I hope you all have been enjoying the tournament, regardless if your team is in and out or your bracket was busted, which I'm sure it was, as this has been a wild tournament. But obviously, I have been enjoying it. Outside of the Final Four game on Saturday night, I also got to see Everclear at the Windjammer. For those who don't remember them, they are a rock band who had a lot of hits in the 90s. I want to say like early to mid 90s, maybe a little bit into the late 90s too, like 97, 98. And they're still around and kicking. They've been touring for years and years, and they've been to the Windjammer. This was the third year in a row. I'd missed them the first two times, so I figured, hey, this is the year. And so I made it out, was able to catch their show. These shows at the Windjammer are so much fun because, they're out on the back in the sand where, I'm sure if you've been to the Windjammer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of times they play volleyball out there. Sometimes you can just hang out in the sand and you're just steps from the ocean. And if you're up on the balcony, you can see the ocean behind the stage, and it was just perfect weather too, low 70s, so it wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold, although it got a little chilly as the sun went down, but it was a fun show. I'm not a huge fan. I knew the handful of songs that were on the radio and, kind of recognized some others that I probably heard in passing when I was younger, but it was fun. And again, just a great venue. If you have a chance to go see an act out there on the beach stage that they have, I mean, absolutely do it. It's a lot of fun, and the crowd was good. And yeah, just perfect weather for it. So no complaints for me. I had a good weekend. Hope you all did as well. And let's make sure this is another good week here in the Holy City. So let's get into the news. A lot of legislative stuff, and for once, got some good news. It's rare, I know, but some things that I like as far as legislation that is moving forward. So first is House Bill H 3563. Under this proposal, feminine hygiene products such as tampons, period pads, and other menstrual care products would be exempt from sales taxes. What does that mean for the state? They would give up about $5.9 million in annual revenue. And it would also keep about $1.4 million of local sales taxes out of the municipal side. So proponents of the bill, which the House Ways and Means Committee approved, by the way, on Thursday in a 22-0 vote, they say that the sales taxes can be regressive and that taxing these products hurts poor people. Feminine hygiene products would join 83 types of other products that are currently exempt from sales tax in the Palmetto State. These include things like hearing aids, prescription medicine, and groceries. These exemptions also include Viagra and wrapping paper, which is used during the sale and delivery of, quote, tangible personal property, end quote. Currently, 23 states and the District of Columbia exempt feminine hygiene products from sales tax. So South Carolina would be the 24th state if they can get that approved. I will keep you posted. Next up is a bill that is expected to be filed again in the South Carolina House of Representatives that would make businesses that sell alcoholic food products follow the same rules as those that sell alcoholic beverages. South Carolina Representative Spencer Wetmore, a Democrat from Charleston, told the Charleston City paper that she's planning on refiling this bill. She mentioned that on last Tuesday morning to them. Alongside Wetmore in co-sponsoring the bill is South Carolina Rep. Micah Caskey, a Republican from Lexington. They co-sponsored the same bill last year. It did pass the House by a vote of 66 to 35 back on March 30th of 2022, but it didn't really didn't really pick up any steam, didn't get really the coverage that you would think it would in the Senate, and ended up essentially dying on the South Carolina Senate Judiciary Committee when the most recent session ended. So they're bringing it back. So what does this bill do? If the bill becomes law, it would have a major impact on a business that you're probably familiar with. It's a local food truck called Booze Pops. They actually have several trucks now. They've been able to sell alcohol infused popsicles thanks to a loophole that currently classifies its products as food, even though they have alcohol in it. The owner of Booze Pops, his name is Woodrow Norris. He said that his business started with a single van about 8 years ago and now has more than a dozen trucks throughout the state. Last year's bill would have shut down the entire business unless he found a brick and mortar location. So if Wetmore files a bill this session, it could have a similar impact. Hate to see a business close, due to this. However, they did find a loophole, which more power to them finding a way to have this business. But there are some local businesses in town who think it's unfair that they don't have to follow some of the same rules, including not having to have a brick and mortar location. Seems a little iffy to me. Like, is this really like necessary? But I also sort of get it. It's one of those things where you're like, I again hate to see a business be forced to close or change directions from what's working for them, but also understanding that it's not necessarily a fair playing field. So interesting to see where this will go and hear some of the debates. I would definitely like to hear more about this, what both sides believe, and just like everything else, I'll keep you posted as there are developments. More legislative news. South Carolina could become the first state in the Southeast to guarantee teachers 6 weeks of paid family leave. That's right. School district employees from across the state could get up to 6 weeks of paid parental leave under legislation that is being touted as an inexpensive way to help stop the teacher exodus that we are facing. Currently, teachers may get pregnant and decide they don't want to come back to teaching, or they may run out of time that they are allowed to be out and could be forced out. This would hopefully prevent that. The proposal that advanced unanimously back on March 30th to the House of Representatives floor would make South Carolina the only state in the Southeast to provide teachers 6 weeks of paid time off for having or adopting children. Georgia began offering half of that total back in 2021. The bill would extend to teachers and other school district employees what the legislature actually did for all other state employees last year. That law took effect back on October 1st and provided 6 weeks of paid leave to state employees who give birth or become parents by adopting a child under 18. The spouse who doesn't give birth, or in the case of adoption, the parent who's not the primary caregiver, was allowed to take 2 weeks off with pay. Parents who foster a child in state custody could also take 2 weeks of paid leave off. Teachers were obviously upset that they were not included in that original bill, that it was other state employees, but not them. So they were obviously upset. This would be a good measure, it seems, to make them happier, more likely to stay in the job, prevent them from running out of time when they go out for having or adopting a child or fostering as well. Now, there is a 1993 federal law that guarantees parents up to 12 weeks off, but it doesn't require that leave is paid. So they're protected for 12 weeks. They can't be fired for taking 12 weeks off. But when there was no rule about paid, if they ran out of sick days or if they only allowed a certain amount of time, they obviously were not being paid for the remainder of that. So this is a much improved process. Instead of having to use their sick time and running out of it quicker, they are now guaranteed up to 6 weeks off that is paid. Now, assuming they have no other time off, yes, that does mean there's still 6 weeks that they are allowed to take after that, where they are not guaranteed any pay if they don't have any sick or vacation time. So Again, the good news is, though, that they are now getting that 6 weeks guaranteed, or two if they're not the primary caregiver or the spouse that gave birth. Um, but it is having that amount paid is good, and also protecting the job, continuing to have that job protected, of course, is also great. So that doesn't change with that 12 weeks, but a big improvement to include teachers in that 6 weeks of paid time off. Next up, we're talking gambling bills. That's right. South Carolina is considering some gambling bills that have typically just not gone nowhere in this state. But it seems that may be changing. There is a bill that will allow online wagering specifically on horse races that has passed through the committee process in both chambers of the legislature. And the House version might actually get a floor debate this coming week. At the same time, there's a separate House effort to enact a sweeping legalization of online sports betting that has gained momentum that, again, previously we have not seen in the state. And it'll actually be considered by the Ways and Means Committee in the coming weeks. That broader sports betting legislation is very unlikely to even be debated in the House, let alone, pass. Not this year, at least, as the deadline to send bills to the Senate is coming up on April 10th. So it's expected that this may not even get very far in the process, but it has been introduced. It may get people talking, and it may end up coming back in future sessions. So it's good to see these things being debated. Supporters of this bill say their goal is to fine tune the legislation this year before pushing for passage next year. So, all part of their plan right now. There are several states that have started to allow online gambling of all sports. So, it seems South Carolina may be eventually getting somewhat closer to doing what some of those other states did as well. And lastly, a update on the medical provider that the Charleston County Detention Center could be using going forward. The Charleston County Finance Committee approved a selection committee's recommendation for a new inmate medical provider starting this summer. This came after an hour and a half long executive session held behind closed doors this past Thursday evening. The committee ended up voting unanimously in favor of awarding the contract bid to a company called Vital Core Health Strategies. You may remember the current medical provider, WellPath, has faced much controversy after two inmate deaths in the last 4 months under their care. Those two men, one, the cause of death for 50-year-old Julian Jenkins has not been released, but the one we talked about previously on this podcast was 28-year-old D'Angelo Brown, whose death was ruled a homicide by gross medical negligence. Again, just a horrific story that you may remember. When that one came to light, we also found out that WellPath has had other inmate deaths around the country and lots of questions about how effective their care is. WellPath's contract is set to expire on June 30th, more than 3 years after that initial contract was signed. As you may remember, it kind of got, I don't know if rushed through is the right word, but not the normal process was followed due to the pandemic. WellPath was chosen, and then it was actually they re-upped the contract multiple times despite some of these problems that we've heard about in other states and now here in ours as well. The contract bid will be awarded after a final vote by the Charleston County Council. They are expected to do that at this week's meeting on Tuesday. So hopefully there will be a new medical provider that will take over for WellPath, which obviously is appears to have some problems. I have to do the whole allegedly thing, despite a coroner ruling that one death was due to gross medical neglect. So it seems we should be able to say that they are at fault here, but officially, under the eyes of the law, we haven't gotten there yet. Regardless, it is time for that company to go, and hopefully, this new one will be much better. That'll do it for this Monday's edition of Holy City Sinner Radio. Have a great rest of your week. I can't wait to speak to you on Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to help out the podcast and Holy City Sinner, there's so many ways to do it. You can like, review, share, rate, subscribe, whatever to this podcast. Anything you can do on your streaming platform, please do so. You can also, pass this along to anybody else you think may be interested in listening and make sure they subscribe so they don't miss a single episode. You could also go to holycitycenter.com/shop to pick up some merchandise and go to patreon.com/holycitycenter. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins, who produces each and every episode through LMC Sound Systems. She also has a podcast, F&B Radio, that you should listen to. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode. Be sure to go listen to his music wherever you do so, perhaps on the same streaming platform you're using right now. Make sure you listen to all his tunes, go listen to Lindsay's podcast, and then circle back with me on Wednesday for the next episode. Until then, good night and good luck.